Welcome to Overtime on Inferno, your weekly roundup of all the biggest stories in CSGO, quicker than Dupree hits his 7th life in his career. Quick reminder, rate and review us by the end of the episode. It really helps us. I'm Logan. This is oSee Ask. We're not actually going to talk about Rio today. I know that may surprise some of you, but that's okay. Today is actually an interesting day. It's technically our 101st episode of this podcast, which we've been doing for like 2.5 years now. But We're counting it as the 100th because there was an emergency Counter-Strike 2 episode, so I'm pretending that doesn't exist. So this is our 100th scheduled episode, and it happened to coincide with one of the biggest names in Counter-Strike saying that whoever wants to interview him can. So
almost literally one of the biggest names in Counter-Strike.
Yeah, almost literally one of
a lot of letters in that surname.
And he's tall too. So
he's
like
very tall, yeah.
So without much further ado, Launders. Welcome, Launders, to Overtime on Inferno.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I feel like I should have been on here a long time ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you're always welcome back.
Yeah. Anytime. I think we had a discussion about it, and then we threw it out because something else happened, and then we never went further than Elliot and I saying, we should have Launders on, and that was the end of the discussion. But we did it now. So we have a large set of questions that we're going to start, but for anyone who's ever listened to this podcast before, we're probably not going to get through more than 2 of them. So
it's usually the way.
The tangential podcast.
So, we wanted to start with your career because you've had a little bit of an interesting career in terms of Counter-Strike, right? Where you started as wanting to be a player, then you did some journalism for a bit, and then you were coaching for a bit, I think, and then now you're casting and kind of all over the place throughout every single bit in Counter-Strike up until the point of now you're like casting majors and stuff.
Yeah.
So like what was the point in which you, this is a very hit question, right? What was the point in which you realized you were too shitty to be a pro and you had to go into the production side in order to like be relevant?
Yeah, well, I looked back on my 70, 80 yard main and I was like, all right, this is going to be a grind. I think I saw myself as like somebody, I had a really good one. Everyone had that one good season. I had one good season where I was IGLing for the first time. We were probably the second best team in main, and then we got a good seed of playoffs, and we lost the team who won main, and I remember we were one map off of making Premier, and I was like, man, if we do this again, we probably could do it. But, ESEA is like 3 months of a grind for one, single elimination playoffs into if you fuck it up or you get a really awkward seed, you got to go 3 months again and grind to another season. And I had already begun casting at that point. And so I just had to make the executive decision of like, do I want to attempt to go pro? And do I want to try to do commentary and have like a longer career as a content creator in CSGO? And when I first started my YouTube channel, I already had made the decision that I was like 22. And I was like, I played StarCraft when I was 13, right? Uh-huh. And I'd play StarCraft when I was 13. And I remember my first time playing against a Korean. And I was like, I'm never going to be pro. I'm never going to be good enough to like win money in this game. And said that, and with that understanding of, historical context in esports, being 22 coming into CSGO and watching esports since I was younger and then just taking a break and coming back, I was like, there's no point in me trying to grind. Like I didn't, there was no Roy of the world to show me. There's no Roger Bannister for me in esports. Okay. So later on, you'd see that there were some good stories of older players who have made a career of themselves, but I couldn't really see that for myself. So I think I was just surprised at how much I enjoyed competing. And then when I had like a taste of success, I was really thought about continuing to go on. But I think I would have ended up somewhere at like a, lower tier North American invite after a few seasons type of career, which, that's like the fourth layer of Dante's Inferno or whatever.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not trying to.
It's like stuck in NA tier 3, which is basically the world tier 7 kind of vibes.
Yeah. Or it's Valorant tier 1. So
what? Exactly. That's a good point. Actually, that's a good question. If you were doing the same thing, like if you were in the same point like 3 years ago, right, when you had to hit that like that wall in Maine, would you have swapped games? Would you have like thought about that? Would that have been something on your mind? Because we know a lot of people did.
Yeah. I think I am the kind of person that if Valorant came out, I would have tried it, but I would be like, this is the Counter-Strike's the game I understand. Like I'm very like kind of loyal to the game that I play a lot of. Yeah. I think I would have regretted a year in seeing like the salaries that were thrown over to some of the players that went over, and then thinking about like the players in this theoretical world that I was probably as good as that ended up getting paid 3 times as much as me. There would have probably been some envy there, but I think I'm the type of person who would have just stuck it out and just continue to do the thing that I invested a lot of time into. If I like something, and I stay with it. Like I always thought of myself as like, if I had found out about Melee before Counter-Strike, I would have been a Melee commentator. And, and that's a struggle, right? Because you got Nintendo above you. So even though the game is great, it would suck for other reasons.
Yeah. So you kind of hit your big break, I'd say just before COVID and then like into COVID of like when you were doing like big tournaments and stuff. So how did everyone being sent home and you have to do everything online and stuff, how did that help or how did that hurt everything that you had like worked up to until that point?
It's kind of sort of weird because I think the only thing that changed, so from the perspective of other people looking at me, I don't know what it looks like. From my perspective, all I saw was that what's going on into, wow, DreamHack is now 30 days instead of 7, and now I'm doing it from home, with half a suit on. And like, all I saw was that literally, we got the same day rights, but now our events are like 3 times longer and back to back. So I was making more money somehow, but I was also just kind of working for like a less important event in my life, you know what I mean? Because it was all online, into working way, way more days than I ever thought I would, and for much longer stretches. And even when we did travel, there were these 2-week, you have to stay in a place for 2 weeks and then quarantines and stuff like that. So events never wanted to send us home. So we would take extended breaks in between events inside of Europe, in quarantines or in hotels. So very, very strange. Can't really complain because we actually did end up making a lot of money and still working a lot of events. But it doesn't feel like my career kind of went anywhere from there. I think we grinded out and learned different ways of becoming better commentators, like because of the actual endurance aspect of COVID. And it made it so that we had to like get through a lot more games where we had to pretend there was a crowd in our room, or like, what's the difference between a playoff and a group stage? Or like, I remember this quote from Flesh was like, sometimes I log in and I don't know what tournament I'm playing in. That was how I felt that's how I felt when I was commentating sometimes, because it was just all the same.
Yeah, every venue's the same. You're always speaking to the same camera, into the same microphone, same kind of thing, and just all blends together at one point.
That really does sum Flusher up as well, doesn't it? It's just like, if it's not a major final, I'm not interested. It really sums him up as a player. Yeah. We wanted to ask as well about, speaking of the change and how you've seen like esports journalism change over the time. Obviously, you had a spell where that was something you were doing, and then before you full-time committed to content creation, as it were. Obviously, it's been a bit of a talking point in the last 6 months with Richard Lewis is always banging on about this, and sort of your perspective on how things have changed.
I know things have changed for journalists. I don't know. I think that like it does feel like we don't have as much of the same level of journalism or like sort of ambition in terms of journalism as we used to with some of the stories that have gotten broken. Maybe we have slightly less drama overall as things have sort of smoothed out, even though we still have tons of crazy shit going on all the time. It's not something I think about too much, and honestly, I never really looked at myself as a journalist. Like, even though I was working at Yahoo Esports, I just thought of myself as purely an interviewer. And then when I worked, that was when I was at events, and then when I worked at the company, I just looked at myself as a YouTuber, because like that was my job, was like upload like a couple times a week and come up with cool things to upload. I consume, like, I read all of Richard's Substack articles. I read a lot of journalistic pieces on many different places, but that's pretty much the beginning and end of how I think about journalism.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So
what about you?
I think when you lose, or when somebody like Richard Lewis almost he's retired, quote unquote. I think losing somebody like that is a real loss, because he is somebody with not only the nous on how to write stuff like that, but the balls to actually like investigate and release stuff like that. I think losing him from a mainstream source is an issue, but then the fact that he's moved to Substack and is able to just publish whatever he wants, I think is probably a positive thing. But I do think esports journalism as a whole loses too much money to ever be successful in what people want esports journalism to do. And the only way to make money is to do SEO and all the articles that nobody enjoys.
Rest in peace, Jackson.
Rest in peace, Jackson.
Yeah, rest in peace, Jackson. Yeah, I understand that. It's hard, especially with just like written form content. It's a shame for people who are excellent writers and also, you know, like that's their skill set to be so hamstrung by the fact that like video content and things just make more money. Video, live content, fast content, like that's just the way things go. But I like that Richard goes to Substack because, like, you know, if he trends up, he keeps a lot of momentum and can actually make like a ton of money, honestly, and really just do things exactly the way he wants. And he's clearly shown a lot of motivation with how much he's released. The downside of that is I don't think everyone can have a brand like Richard can, and yet can still have good journalistic pieces to like want for us to want to see, but we might not ever see them because we don't have the personality behind it, the brand power, that sort of thing. So that's a shame. But then I think you can maybe have a situation where like Richard could be the company that has the umbrella of journalists under him, you know, and I think that's what I see in the future of esports. And he talked about this with Ludwig and a few of these other content creators starting organizations. Like that's actually the path to sustainability for a lot of things, is like proving you can do everything bootstrapping it yourself, and you know, the main form of payment is your own time as opposed to VC money, and then using that money to reinvest, and then just everything growing from there.
Yeah, we talked about this a lot like a couple weeks ago when CLG folded, or they got sold to NRG or whatever it was, and like TSM was talking about selling their LCS slot and stuff, and how like esports winter is like really happening in NA now. Right. And it was, and the whole conversation ended with like every successful org has like a secondary revenue stream, whether it's content creation, whether it's like production company, whether it's like an app that they have or something, and that the content creation one seems to continue to just have money, and that's where power will end up coming from, is people like Ludwig and Critical will have their own stuff and start making their own because they want to, not because a VC says they have to or anything like that, just because they want to.
Yeah, and they can, you know, if players go and play for like this guy's Toast team or something like that, like they're more happy to take a pay cut because you're going to be so famous. Like you're, you know, you're working with like one of the biggest, most relevant content creators of our time, and like whatever you do in the future, you're gonna have so many eyes on you. So like I think people are. The thing is that like, you know, if everybody who was at the pro level, who was in tier 1, took a 50% pay cut, they continue to play CS happily. I think it's not a fun conversation to think about, but that's just where a lot of money goes when it comes to running teams and things like that. And I think that, you know, one of the best things that we could learn from some of these content creator organizations who are openly running at a loss, but still happy to do it, is that like, they can say, hey, listen, like we're going to be transparent right now. We got no one to impress. We're not making money, so we can't pay you that much. But if you play with us, like, you know, you're going to have like 10,000 followers on an announcement tweet and like 50,000 followers by the end of the month. And then you're going to be so popular that like you can get any opportunity you want in the future.
It's kind of like
that's a huge upside.
It's kind of like the pay for exposure thing that people will say that's like a terrible thing. Yeah. But in this case, it's actually kind of okay because it's a stepping stone and you still do get paid.
Part of the reason pay for exposure is terrible is because the exposure isn't all that.
Yeah,
on an org like that, the exposure is important and it is big. On the sort of finance side, I don't know if you've been reading about the amount it costs to put on events. There's been a discussion about going pay-per-view on events in the last few days on Twitter. I don't know if you've caught with that. I think it's sort of, I don't know if it's well known or if it's even true. Events usually run at a loss, because I've heard conflicting things. But what would be your thoughts on like on that side, on running events and whether pay-per-view would actually work in esports?
I'm pretty hardline in my thoughts about this, but I'd love to like hear your guys' opinion too. But I just simply don't think it'll work, and I think that's because, like, from my perspective right now, sponsor dollars are accounting for like 80% of the revenue for like tournament organizers and organizations in general. And in the 7-figure range, I think to make that from subscribers for pay-per-view, you would have to have hundreds of thousands of people paying probably a small fee. You won't have a few people paying a lot of money like you have in the UFC, because that's not going to happen.
No shot.
But even if you have like one, at a major, I could see something working for like certain select events. You could definitely, people would pay for it no matter what to watch. For the vast majority of the calendar, I don't think that's true. And then you always risk the harm of not enough people seeing it, then not enough people care about Counter-Strike, then not enough people tuning into the next event. But then also, with a pay-per-view model, if you had it for an event, you would probably lose sponsors because you would definitely have less people watching. And then to supplant the money you'd get from sponsor dollars, I think would be really hard to do with just subscriptions in the $5 to $10 range.
To me, the only way a subscription value works for an event is if the event itself is free for everyone to watch and you're giving an additional thing with that. So I think it was Snipe used to did this like for a year or two, where like you could choose who you did, and then they did it for a league as well, where they did Pro View, where you could choose the laner you're watching and stuff. That's like the only kind of time in which I see that this is a viable thing, is like, hey, you can go watch the major for free, but if you're a Simple fanboy and you want to watch Simple and only Simple for the entire live match, you can go do that. And you pay us like $10 an event or something like that. It's not a ridiculous fee or something like that, but it lets you kind of choose your own adventure for the event, but you still get your everyone looks. The problem with that is Snipe exists and did its thing for like a year and no one used it. And then now it doesn't really exist. So
yeah, I think you have to come at it from a position of power. Like, I think right now, let's say a product that's a good example, and I'm the creative director at Blast TV, so I'm a little bit biased here, but like I can see them, how they're trying to think about their model is like, they're creating a platform it's free to use. It's just an alternative to YouTube or Twitch. There's no ads. You can watch it there. And they have some features like you can click on a part of the stream and see when there was a 4K or an ace or something like that in the VOD, which is a nice touch for Counter-Strike viewers. And then we made the Launders show, which is supposed to be just content that lives there exclusively for a while. And all this is just get people to use the website. And it's like, I don't think unless you have like a really, really like a ton of power to draw an audience for a certain amount of time to get them used to it, that it's going to be able to live past that point. Like with Snipe, solid company. We all know the people that were working with it, and they're super cool and they had a good idea, but not enough power in the marketing, not enough ways to get enough people to use it at once to like make it stick, I think.
I feel like if like ESL or Blast did it with the event and said, hey, we are doing this, not Snipe, it may be in the background it's Snipe or something like that, but we're doing this, that may push a little bit more. But the question is like, what's your return on investment? How much do you have to pay to get this to go? And then how much you can actually make from it? And does that even break even?
Yeah.
Because you're adding 10 more observers? You need 10 more computers per match to observe a given player, and then to stream that given player. Like just hardware alone, you need a ton more.
That's true. So you got to come up with enough like low lift ways to make the experience better to watch. Yeah, without like making it a production nightmare.
Without screwing players over, because it's like you can't just chuck OBS on every computer. Every player loses 700 frames like then, and you get players bitching about it.
There's a lot of issues with it, I think, and the idea of being able to direct people to a site that you know they'll enjoy, but without forcing them to do it, is really, really difficult.
One of our friends, Bromobib, has made some awesome Cubism-inspired Counter-Strike posters, which will be up for sale soon. If you're interested, you can just go to readtldr.com/posters. Again, that's readtldr.com/posters to sign up to get notified once they're ready to buy. If you're just listening to the podcast and you're not seeing the beautiful images that are going across your screen, trust me when I say that they're really cool, and just go sign up. I mean, it doesn't hurt you. It's free to sign up for something. You get to look at them. They're really nice. Put them on your wall. They're cool. Just go sign up. It's free. I want to talk about YouTube for a second. So obviously you watch a lot of demos. Is there a player that you really like watching demos of because of like something small that they do or something that they do in general, or is there like one person this is the guy to watch a demo of? Not for like you to improve, but just like you enjoy watching their demos.
Yeah. It's sort of flavor of the month for me. There's always somebody new. I'm like it was Almanac, and then it was like Hunter, and then it was like Stown. You know, I really always find that I'm actually attracted to high versatility players because I think that's like one thing that stands out in Counter-Strike over other games that are role-based, for example, where like if you're good at 4 different roles, you can actually show that in one round. I think that's one of the most attractive things for me personally. So I love that. Right now, though, I would say the person I love watching demos of most is Twistzz. I was watching a lot of his recent games, and I watched a game I actually didn't realize was a terrible match, but it was like the first half he got 1 kill in. It was like versus Vitality. I think it was versus Vitality on Overpass, where Sphinx simultaneously had this like 30 kill game, so no one noticed that Twistzz only had 1 kill. And I was watching it, and I was just thinking the whole time, like, God damn, Twistzz might have the best entry pathing of any player I've ever seen before, because he knows exactly how far to stand from every wall. He knows how to, he can methodically pick apart every single default into his pathing with appropriate timing to how fast his teammates want to play. Like, he would take Connector fast on one round on Overpass. Kerrigan would go fast with him. He had different protocols for angles to check. Then he would have one where he was by himself and he would go slow. Every single time, the only reason he ever lost was like, and this is thinking about the tweet where he said he was exhausted. He just had like a bad spray here and there. But up until the point of shooting, he set up an advantaged fight every single round. And so all I could think was like, wow, despite missing these shots, he really does have everything ironed out to the point that I think he could wake up feeling his worst and still outshine almost any other entry fragger right now in terms of his protocols. So he's the guy right now for me.
So I think that's really interesting because so much of how even good players, I think even great players will probably still think like so much of the game is based on your hands and whether or not you rip heads off on the day. But like realistically, the game is more about taking advantaged fights than it is about winning disadvantaged fights. And it is more difficult to clear things in a way that gives you the advantage than it is to learn to aim almost.
Yeah, I've got one thing on that. Like you can't average 1.30 on a year just winning all your disadvantaged fights. It doesn't make any sense. No player is going to say like they felt their best all year and that's why they got a 130. Like when Simple and Zywoo, like they had off days and they still did way better than everyone else. And that's because like position, like Device is the best like example. He's always in the right place versus players who are getting paid like $20,000 a month, like figure out where to stand. You know what I mean? Like he's always making shots look easy. And that just sort of goes to show you that like positioning is the most important part of Counter-Strike, in my opinion. And how you get there is a whole other art. It's so easy to explain like where you're supposed to be at the moment. But the reason you can't replicate it is because you can't figure out the decisions that led them to that point. You just see the end result all the time. But the consistency definitely comes from just your movement, your map knowledge, and like where you know to stand.
So we had this conversation a couple weeks ago that we're convinced that Twistzz is a top 5 player of all time.
I like that.
And I wanted to know where he stood, because our reasoning was very simple. He's won 2 Grand Slams. He's been on 2 of the best teams ever, and he's been a good player on 2 of the best teams ever. So
he can fill in any role on the 2 of the best teams of all time. He's filled in multiple different roles. He can close rounds, as you say. He can open them perfectly well. He's been the guy in the big moment. See on Nuke against Na'Vi, like biggest moment, biggest round of the game. Like they went right, Twistzz, you're the main man. You're throwing this ball. Like it was as simple as that. Like he's clutch in that sense. He's a great closer rounds, great opener rounds. Like he is incredibly versatile and has been on 2 incredible teams. Like
I can gush about Twistzz as well. Like I was like, he Grand Slam, he was the best player on the team. The whole like Liquid Grand Slam, he was the best player on the team. FaZe obviously not exactly, but in some of their big games, and all of FaZe's biggest losses, he was actually one of the only people contributing. Like unfortunately, this last the last Armor was struggling for him, and that Rio was a struggle for him. But if we go back to like Rio, when they couldn't qualify, he still had his like 90 to 180 yard every map. He was extremely solid, and they qualified this time around no problem. And then he has the Canada call moment. Yeah, a little bit of problem, but they qualified. So yeah. we won't talk about it until the major. Yeah. And I just talked about him as a entry fragger. He's not even the guy who takes the most opening duels in the team, right? It's just that the versatility is there. So like, yeah, I looked at a guy, I'm like, you could probably learn so much from him. He's the guy who could absolutely be undisciplined and still be a solid player, and yet seems to have just as much discipline as Robs in every single one of his roles. And then the best part for me was like, one thing I noticed was no matter how methodical he was about an entry path, if something needed to be sped up, he would cancel his pathing and take the faster route to be there a tenth of a second earlier, not jiggle, and get the trade by a sliver just because he was selfless enough to like change it up and confident enough to like put himself at a disadvantage just when he needed to be. So yeah, I don't know what the top 4 is now off the top of my head.
We couldn't figure it out either. We got Simple was there, we got Twistzz was there. I think we put Forest there, and then I don't remember where else we moved that.
I think if you're going all time, you have to put Olaf in there. But
yeah, he probably. It was a weird day that we made this list, because I think we had to talk ourselves into top 10, and then very quickly we talked ourselves into top 5.
He's so good, man. Like he just doesn't do. He has no flaw. Like there's no other player I can think of that's like as flawless as he is. Like everyone else has an issue, and I cannot find a flaw with Twistzz game. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, like it should be that he's a baiter or something, but he's not.
He's not. Yeah, he's just not a baiter. He does everything really well, whereas everyone else, even like Simple, you can talk about the fact that he tilts, or he can be difficult to work with.
No. Well, I have a tilt thing about Twistzz. This is from when he was younger, but the reason that he chose Gum is because he used to be a Psy on the mic player, and when he used to play, pro level, when he started playing pro in NA. A lot of pros didn't like him. Like I remember Automatic didn't want to play with him early on in TSM, even when they were teammates. And he was apparently he was like a emo kind of shutdown style player, and that was an issue for Twistzz. But obviously he's not there anymore. But I think he still choose the Gum. But apparently he chose the Gum so that he wouldn't use his mic as much in game. That's what he said.
Being able to recognize that that's a flaw in your own game, and then like your solution is something like that it's quite like. It takes a lot of guts to admit, no, like this is something wrong with.
That is one more upside about Twistzz. You're right.
Yeah,
he's able to come back from his own mistakes and do better.
Yeah. No, that is like people who can recognize their flaws and get over them. You have to give them a lot of credit. I think Simple gets a lot of credit for overcoming how supposedly difficult he was to work with, and he got a lot of credit. And then you occasionally see it creep back in.
So. Other side of the same question we asked 27 minutes ago. Is there a player that you won't watch or that you hate watching for some reason that you like? Do you think is like overrated in the way that like they don't pass the eye test or something like that?
So the meme for my channel was that like I actually set out at one point to do a Brokey week, and so I was like I watched a game and then I was like, man, Brokey's like crazy. I'm going to do a whole week on Brokey because he was up and it was like 21, I think. And he had like the most clutches in the first half of the year. And then he was sort of like the hard carry on a team with so many stars on it. And I was like, okay, this guy needs like so much attention right now. And I'd never done this before. So like, let's do Brokey week, like 5 days of Brokey. And the more demos I watched, the less I liked him. I was like, oh my God, what is happening right now? And then I looked at some of his stats and I was like, man, like so few opening duels.
Yeah.
Like his impact was actually incredibly low in games they couldn't win. It was just like, I was like, this is crazy, the craziest comparison ever, but he is actually no different than Shiro. At the time, they're both better players now, but when you looked at their opening kill attempt rate versus exactly, the only difference for people's perception is that Brokey is like a more high action opper, but the truth always was the action had to come to him first. Or it had to be in a clutch, which is the exact same.
He's like high action in the last 20 seconds of the round.
Yeah. But for some reason, everyone thinks he's Jackie Chan, but he's not.
Yeah. No, he's incredibly passive. Yeah. I just think of him as like a really upmarket skadoodle. It plays in the same way. Like
we'll take that actually.
Yeah, it's great, like fantastic clutcher, which Skadoodle also was a very good clutcher, and a good turret AWPer, and he'll like quietly drop. Brokey's a lot better. He'll like quietly drop 25. The observer will never be on him, and he'll have 25 kills. It's bizarre. But yeah, as you say, he doesn't take opening duels, and that's why like FaZe at their best win lots of 3v5s because of Brokey, but they're probably also in a lot of 3v5s because Brokey doesn't take opening duels. It's the dichotomy.
I want to talk a little bit about America, North America specifically, actually, and South America.
Specifically. And I read the first question of
first team on the list, FURIA, obviously. Yeah. Okay. So I have a question that I've been wondering for a while, and Elliot and I have tiptoed around answering it. Okay, but I feel the need to answer this. When is the point in which FURIA has to give up on art?
Dude, so I know almost nobody saw the NAR because it was just like
I did
brand new streams. Okay, so you saw them like completely change their style like entirely.
Yeah,
they just sort of like
they started being a
everything.
European team. Yeah,
and I talked to csgo, and he's like, yeah, like obviously I talked to poor csgo, who was like, yeah, you know, we are better when we live a little longer, which, you know, what he meant by that was like, we're better when art lives a little longer, right? So I was like, yeah. And so the thought is there. I think the only issue for FURIA is, you know, they don't want to end up in a situation opposite to where they started, which is they broke into tier 1 because of their atypical style and because teams couldn't find prep against teams like FURIA. So when they played against them, FURIA could catch them all. And now FURIA taking themselves more seriously and are becoming the Astralis that they wanted to avoid in the first place. But now it's a question of, do they have good enough players? I actually think that they're pretty close to saying that they do. I think that they almost have some, you know, similar formula to, you know, some of the other top teams. They obviously can't compete. We can't compare like Safe to oSee, but you could compare like csgo to Nico right now. I mean, actually, csgo is doing better.
We're very high on the csgo train here.
Yeah, so I think there is actually an argument that maybe you should just see. Maybe they should actually just see if they're at a point that, and also I think we have all seen art at one point actually be a good player, right? Like, we
absolutely have.
We just kind of see him lose confidence, right?
The problem was him never being a bad player. The problem that at least I always had with this team is either you had an art that was the best player on the team, that was the most aggressive human alive, and would get every entry or whatever, and they would win the game because of him being overtly aggressive and the opposite of every outsider's game ever. Whereas you'd see some games where he'd get shut down every single round like that, and then you're playing a 4v5 the entire game. That it was
like
so flip-floppy.
Yeah, very similar to Nafli.
Yeah, that there was that if you had one of those days where art like wasn't on his game, or the other team like was like prepped for art or like had figured it out, that you weren't winning that game. That like even with csgo performing at like top 5 in the world last year, or like with Yuri being insanely good and safe like hitting shots, you can't win a 4v5.
There's like one fundamental principle about 2020 that defined the meta for me, and that was the scout IGL style, which was if Glaive, Kerrigan, Art, or other, I think all these other IGLs actually tried to play a little bit more like Art, actually, because of FURIA were actually quite good in North America, and we're starting to get attention. I think Heroic definitely grabbed elements from what they saw that could work. But what we saw was that people were willing to sacrifice a 5v5 for enough information. So that the quintessential example for me was outside smokes on nuke. If you're on CT side, if you flash Glaive through smokes on outside and he saw nothing, you win the round because you don't push hot, and you lock down ramp, you rotate 1 to ramp, 2 and upper, and your outside player can go see whatever it is, and you're safe on all fronts. If you see 5 people, then you can instantly take over lobby control, you could push ramp, you could do you have the perfect adjustment. So even though you lost a player, you got so much positional compensation that it made up for it. But then that fell out of the meta as the 5v4 just has always been so important. And the first IGL who kind of was in the middle of that scout meta was definitely Kerrigan. He doesn't do that at all anymore. Like, he takes himself way more seriously than individual player. We saw in Antwerp, there was that round where you got like the 3K in library on Inferno, like one of those last rounds, like round 29. And you're like, this is a Kerrigan like we've never seen before. Like, he gets 1.5 max in 2018, right? And I think that's a difference for FaZe, that they all their 5 players took themselves seriously, and most teams who survived out of that meta and ended up in the top 5 all had better IGLs that consistently fragged. And even when Nafany was sort of still doing the aggressive plays, he was actually more successful before. He's just not as successful now.
I think that was the thing with Nafany is when Cloud9, at the time Gambit, were winning events, it felt like Nafany was one of the hottest prospects in the world because he was putting up like 1.1s, going in like really aggressive on both sides of the map as an in-game leader, and you were like, this kid's like 19. He's taking on the best teams in the world. He's winning duels that he shouldn't be winning. It was like watching Glaive when Glaive could frag.
Yeah.
And you were like, this guy is it. And then now you watch him when those plays don't work, be that because he's been figured out or, whatever the reason is. And you see the downside of that style. As you say, like the meta has changed away from it. People know now that it's coming, and it's a lot easier to deal with when you know it's coming. But I agree with the point that FURIA don't want to become like Astralis or whoever the team to be at the moment, Na'Vi or FaZe, because are you better off being a worse version of a European team or the best version of FURIA you can be? And that's a very difficult question because we've seen the best version of FURIA and they still haven't won anything. Yeah. So maybe it's time to reinvent and hope, because there's no way Serato isn't good enough to win events, and you just have to give him the chance to carry you. Yeah,
it's just sad that because they were playing almost as low as like Cloud9, like these last few matches that they played, which is really sad. Which is fine that Cloud9 exists, but I don't want you don't want every team to play like that. You kind of just want to see you want to see all styles succeed. Like that's like the most fun.
Yeah,
for everyone. But there is definitely a trend of all the most aggressive riflers in the world losing a lot of confidence. Even Yukinder is not as just sort of like ironclad as he once was. Like people know what his set plays are, and like the reality is that in every aggressive option, whether it's fucking poker, sports, Counter-Strike, there's always going to be a limit to the amount of ways you can innovate. And ultimately, the reason that as the game keeps progressing, the more optimizations come in, that also comes with, having more than one single style that dictates what kind of team you are. So like Art's got to keep that like himself in his back pocket, and then maybe for the meteor rifle rounds have different tempos, but then still have ways in which he can express himself like he normally does. And then maybe you have a nice medium. Right now it feels like just too much unlike them. So I get what you mean.
Yeah, I think I say it's normal in any competitive discipline that the more it evolves, the more defensive it becomes, and then there has to be an offensive revolution. In basketball, it became like 3-point shooting. In football, it's like there's all sorts of ways like people have innovated to get past the defensive style, and I think FURIA probably need to reinvent how they break down teams because it's become a little bit stale. This is a shame because it's really fun to watch.
All right, I got one more America question. You should have seen this one coming from a mile away. Evil Geniuses. America's team, if you would. Which I don't at all. So you tweeted something in which I fully agreed with immediately. I'm going to read it so that way you can remind yourself. EG would have more fans with a full NA lineup and win just as much. They have offered so much support to NA and somehow become the region's bottleneck at the same time. Mind-blowing. Refresh can't save EG, and EG signing international talent when they have bought access to owning multiple entire NA rosters is embarrassing. This isn't League of Legends.
Yeah. I stand by that 100%. Like, okay. It's like I had the revelation at the showdown when EG Black played in place of EG, and then they had to win over FURIA. And I was just like, wow. Like, honestly, even if they lost, it was like the fact that they did it as 5 players that you had to pick from only NA players to made it more impressive that they even came close to beating FURIA, and then they beat them, and that's why there was such a high level of jubilation between everyone who was watching how exciting it was. And it was obviously fresh as well, too. If you see them play long enough, eventually we would get bored of EG Black and then want roster changes. But since they were all North American, it's at least like, you're if they achieve something in this and they create a gestalt, then it's sort of like way more impressive than if you recruit or pay for help that's not even technically better than the peak NA players of past times, and then you still it just seems so stupid. Like if you're going to grab someone from Europe that's going to play for you, at least have it be like a blockbuster tier 1 player as a organization that is paying for 3 rosters in total. Like it doesn't really make sense to like go for a budget option. So you're no longer using your feeder system, and now you're hamstringing your fan base, and then you're also potentially ruining the careers of like very decent tier 2 European players.
Yeah, I think we gave them a lot of credit for using EG Black at that event, because it was like, it would have been easy to just send like the dregs of the main team, but they actually, no, like you have this roster,
use it.
You use them, and like you're willing to give them a lot more leeway when they lose, or you know, if they have a bad game, you're like, well, they're the academy team. Like you're not expecting massive things, so you're actually more willing. Like when EG's main team loses, all you can think of is like, how much are they paying Breezy? How much are they paying Breezy? That's all you can think of when you watch their main team lose. When you watch EG Black lose, you go, well, to be fair, like it's Junior, it's Hex. Like you're not expecting massive, and when they do well, you're like, oh right, this is what the project is about. And it's like, and then you like, I'm probably higher on the refresh move than most people, because I think. I actually think Refresh is quite a decent player, and I think he is an upgrade over what they had. And I think if there's anything North America does lack, it's callers, people who are willing to make a mid-round call and lead from the front. If he's willing to do that, which it sounds like from what Warburg has said he is, and he is more of a leader type, I think that's probably the one. Like you're going to have to import somewhere if you want to be good on the main stage. The issue is I just don't think they necessarily have the talent around that for Refresh to be like, you have Refresh and then you have like, if you had Refresh and then you had Elige, like an on-form Breezy, and you had Twistzz or something, you'd be like, this team's great, like this team's going to fry. But when it's him and it's like Breezy who isn't on good form, and Wiz who has been...
Can't even name him.
Yeah, this is the problem.
I'm trying to remember. I was like,
it's like we have
Hex. No, he's on the black team. So Wiz,
Neelan,
Neelan, who I think is okay, but again, you've already imported one leader. Now you've imported a second. It seems strange.
And Automatic, who we always forget is on this team because
he doesn't deserve it.
He's also inconsistent, along with Breeze.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
he's inconsistent, but I think his inconsistencies are probably largely to do with the team's inconsistencies. Because we've seen him being consistent on.
I just thought that the esports model was supposed to be either you win a lot or you're really popular, you know. And then the Cloud9 like double dipped with their 2018 run. Like they had a really popular team that like holy shit they won, you know. And then it was just wow, like this is the craziest thing that's ever happened. But the path to profitability, I thought it was either like you got people to like fanboy overrate you to the point that like you're making money off merchandise and like views and things like that. Or you have a good enough team that wins, so they like make up for the lack of personality that they have because they just like are collecting trophies and everyone just respects the fuck out of them. And it feels like EG have just like done the opposite as hard as they possibly can.
They cover the least likable team and they don't win.
It's like it's truly a thing of like, if they were an NA team, I'd like them so much more. It's like, hey, we have 3 NA orgs, right? We have Complexity, who have like actually said, fuck it, we're going NA for the most part, right?
Because
like,
you'd be less embarrassed to cheer for them if they lost, you know?
Yeah, like you have J2, who's South African, we've basically adopted, right, at this point. And then you have Halzerk, who's basically American as it is, as like
he is the most American Norwegian.
Ryan's decided he's American, so at this point he's American, right? And I don't feel bad rooting for Complexity because, well, there's 3 North Americans there, plus someone we've adopted, and an Opper you've taken out of, I don't even know, was Halzerk on Dignitas before this?
Yes, he was.
Like, it was Dignitas and then nothing for a while, and then into Complexity. It's like, it's not like
Very
we're taking...
move.
Yeah, no, great Opper. But it's not like we're taking a big Opper away from Europe, or it's not like we're saying we're going to run our entire team around Simple. We're going to bring Simple and we're going to run everything around Simple, and Simple's going to be sorry. They didn't do that. They said, we're going to stick with the NA talent we have, and we're going to bring in a little bit of something that we can't find in NA to a great deal, which, to be fair, Oppers are not a dime a dozen here. We're gonna import that bit that we need. It feels like UG have just gone, we need everything, so let's just import everything.
Also, here's the other thing. Like, you have 10 guys waiting for a chance for 3 move-ups. And the reason I say that is because what are the odds that EG are going to send a European back to Europe?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a way more difficult decision than benching a North American player who can just like move down and play for another team. Is Refresh going to go play for EG Black after playing like for EG for 6 months? Like, no. They're not going to do that. So we know that's the case. And I think that all the players who are on those, the other rosters know that like they've got basically 3 players they've got to wait for it to like expire for their chance to even get a chance to play for the main team. So like
they did move out Cirque, but then they brought in another European in a different role.
They gave Cirque like 6 years.
yeah.
They may have moved him out, but it was a little bit too late.
It took so long too. Yeah,
I'd love to see Junior move into the first team because there's just like there's something about Junior where I just want him to succeed because he was like so roundly mocked. Yeah. I'm not, I did it as well. Like everyone did, and it's like if he comes back and he's actually like he actually performs, you'd be like, it's such a good redemption story. I think that would like give EG a lot of favor. But
the other thing with Junior was he was the best Junior he was when he was playing on FURIA.
Like, well, what do you mean the best Junior
before FURIA, right?
You mean Triumph?
So if you actually go and look at stats, right? I know the eye test doesn't support this, but stats do support this, and I'm a big numbers guy. He had his best ratings when he was playing on FURIA.
Interesting. He was good at the end of Triumph.
It's not by a huge amount. It's like 110 to like 106 or something like that.
But he also had
but he didn't play versus like tier 1 teams on Triumph, right?
No.
There's like one series where he played against Liquid, which I always reference, where he drops like 83 kills in the best of 3. And he absolutely just like shat all over them.
While he was on Triumph, or
when he was on Triumph, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it was an online game. I think the problem with when he was on FURIA is he had good ratings, but if you look at his LAN ratings, they're not good. I think that's really where he struggled. But I'd like to see him it'd be cool to see him redeem himself.
It can't be worse. It can't be worse.
That's where we've gotten to, yeah.
We can't go lower than we are currently.
Wow.
We reached the bottom. We've hit rock bottom. Anything we do now can't be worse.
I think there's a perception right now that like NA can't pump out good operas. And I think that's partly because like oSee, with having literally simple level stats online in North America, got a chance to play on Liquid, and on Liquid he just looks mid. Honestly, he's like pretty good, but like could be better. You can see a good player in there. I don't know if everyone else does, but like no, I think so. Like he's got good fucking nades. He's got good. You see him in a clutch sometimes. You're like, God damn, he's fast as fuck. Like he does have it, but he's not nearly the player he was online. And I just thought that this is probably because Liquid have never had a successful system with an opera at the front.
I said this like 2 weeks ago. I said Liquid needs to go back to just full rifle, and this was if oSee was to move, right? In my head, we were talking about this the other week.
I mean, oSee could rifle. He's a good rifle.
Well, it's put Nitro back on the op, and you don't play around the op because the best Liquid have ever been was when they didn't really have an opper. Like I like Nitro a lot. But he was never the best opper in tier 1.
No, he always seemed like a hybrid. Him and Stewie would have a hybrid, and
he was fine. But they played around the rifles, and they used the fact that they had a Liege, a Nav, and Twistzz on their team to say, "Fuck it."
I think that's the thing, though, isn't it? Well, they had a Liege, Nav, and Twistzz.
But they have a Liege, Nav, and Ykinder now.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying that like Twistzz is a huge step up over Ykinder. I mean, he's definitely. I think he's a step up. But like,
he's better,
with the rifle core of that, like, you can't tell me that rifle core isn't just about as good as the other one.
Yeah, it could be. And if they want to do the aggressive, like they don't want to have 3 people be aggressive around, so like oSee like chill for a second, then maybe he doesn't have to buy ops every round. And if Nitro got an op crutch, that would help his stats a lot. He's definitely not got the same like court vision that he used to, and I think that he does struggle to like just lock down some simple positions sometimes because it just feels like it's just uncomfortable. He's thinking about too much. He's not got confidence, whatever. Put an op in his hands, and all the other players are like ready to win. I think, maybe that is the case. The only thing I'd be worried about is that like in today's game, I think in the top 10 players, it's like 8 oppers all on tier 1 teams, and then you have like Jabby and Nico, and that's it.
Oh yeah,
and it's like,
but if you can't get one of those oppers. If you can't get one of those offers, what option do you have? You've got to innovate a little bit.
You got to buy one.
You're gonna buy one, yeah.
No. But the thing is though that like, this is assuming that they can't use oSee properly. But if they did, he would definitely be a better player. I think it's a lot to do with that.
Absolutely agreed. I had one more question, and then we got to let you get going. So, what's next? And I know that's a big question, but so obviously Counter-Strike 2 is around the corner, right? And so the esports about to evolve in some degree, right? Because we are going to switch to this new game, so people are going to say we're doing stuff here, right? And the production continues to become a bigger deal, and more money gets put into production. Every event looks better than the last event. So what's the next thing? What's the next bit on the horizon that you think that we're going to see in terms of how this esport works?
I don't think a lot will change, and the reason is I think you want to control for variables, and like Counter-Strike 2 coming out is going to offer the broadcast a lot of stuff that we don't know, like the maximum potential of like what smokes are going to look like. Smoke shots are going to look like in replays might just be enough to carry a broadcast to the point that it's like, don't even fucking have to try anymore, boys. Like the game is so good. Like it like I got this like Scout 4K clip where it was someone shot one bullet through a smoke at me, and then I saw their face for a split second, had the round of my life, and hit a crazy flick through the smoke. And I was like, this is the best feeling ever. But like, what if I was oSee? This would be me every round, Like the broadcast is going to be insane. Like dynamic smokes now make it so that like you could have the same product from a production perspective, and the broadcast just be better because the game is going to provide so many more impressive shots and moments, and it's even more of a sandbox and more dynamic than it used to be. So I think the innovation element is going to be like, let's see what the game gives us, and then let's see where we can go from there. But that's my easy answer because I haven't thought about it.
For the first year or so, those shots will definitely just carry the broadcast because it's got to be so new. Everyone's so used to CSGO, like when they see new shit, like this is amazing. So you won't have to do anything for a year.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Have you thought about that at all?
So I've been actually working on HUDs recently.
Okay.
I help run a Counter-Strike League in America. You've actually retweeted us a bunch of times. Counter-Strike Federation.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of their media work for them. I've casted, I've done observing. So I'm making a new HUD right now, and I've been thinking about a lot of this because I think that some HUDs are great and some HUDs are absolutely terrible. And I think that it's like that kind of bit is how you get someone that doesn't know the game into the game. Is that your ease of seeing things on a HUD is so important because it helps you figure out what you want to see and what you need to pay attention to, right?
Yeah,
if the gun that the person like on the sidebar is fucking huge, then you know that that's something important that you need to pay attention to, right? The scores being big means that's an important bit. Like the Zeus in your inventory being small says, hey, that's not that important. And I feel like there's going to be some way in the next year or two that someone's going to do a HUD completely differently. And Blast did this a little bit with the vertical stuff instead of the horizontal players.
I was going to ask, yeah.
I'm iffy, but I could be changed on that.
Okay.
I think they actually just need a change of the view model to make the view model look correct with those under it. So
it's not covered,
Yeah, so it'll look really stupid if you're looking at it without the HUD on it, but with the HUD on it, it looks normal-ish.
Okay.
But either way, it's like, to me, I think that someone in the next year is going to switch something completely in the way that we view the game. And maybe this is due to how Counter-Strike 2 works, or maybe this is due to how someone else does something, but it's going to change how we think about the viewership of the game because of the way that the HUD interacts with the game. That's my thought process. I could be very off.
Yeah, to be honest, for a while I sort of gave up that there could be something like really radical that happens to the HUD because like I hadn't seen it and it's not my arena. But when I saw like the blast HUD, I was like, I really don't like a certain element of like the guns sticking out higher than the cards, or like a certain like the guns being covered by the health. But then there were elements of it that I really liked, and like freeing up the sides of your screen. That seems like definitely something you should absolutely want in Counter-Strike, because like when you play, you want as much real estate as possible. So I was like, wow, maybe there is like room to really radically change the HUD in a good way, and I'm excited to see what that looks like. But I'll leave that to you, I guess, Logan.
Oh, mine's terrible. I took a first stab at it yesterday, and it's atrocious. It's a
the player's in the middle of the screen.
Oh my god!
It's just sort of like a line across the middle of the screen. Can't see anything.
I was thinking about doing something where you basically take up the entire side of the screen, but instead of like these giant pieces. It's just the smaller slivers, but it's a lot more height. So you kind of are 4x3ing it a little bit.
Yeah.
But it takes up more space. It takes up less space overall. I've mapped it out. I don't know how I like it.
Yeah,
it's just
definitely
it's
harder
just
than
me
it
going
looks.
in Photoshop with like a standard picture of Counter-Strike without like the normal HUD on, and just like making boxes and hoping it looks good.
Yeah, it'll be good fit like a big enough font into like the space that you
Oh
want.
my god.
Yeah.
The amount of time I spent yesterday looking for a font for this thing was ridiculous.
Yeah.
All
It's
right.
something harder than it looks.
Oh yeah. All right. Thank you very much for coming on. Huge thank you to Launders.
That's super
And
fun.
we'll be back again next week. Bye.